What's good, family? I'm Nikisha Elise Williams, the host of Black and Published podcast and the author of the novel The Seven Daughters of Dupree. This historical fiction novel is about the secrets kept between mothers and daughters over the course of 7 generations and is told backwards in time from 1995 to 1860. I have an excerpt from the novel for you today. The audiobook is narrated by Bonnie Turpin, and this scene you're about to listen to is from Chapter 1, where the character, Tatiana, affectionately known as Tati, writes a poem to her father.
Dear Daddy, I'm 14 now. Legs brown, same for my hair and eyes. Mimi say she worried 'cause my hips round. It don't matter, ain't no boys calling. Phone don't ring, my line don't sing. I just pose in the mirror. Mama say I'm looking for the wrong kind of attention, but I just be looking at the symmetry of my face, trying to see yours, but hers I can't erase. Oh, I forgot to mention, I think I want to pierce my nose, but Mama would have a fit, I suppose. And I can't do something drastic like that, can't alter my appearance until you get back, or until we meet, at least. I just wanted to let you know what to be on the lookout for. Your little girl, maybe a bit bigger. Chocolate, like you, I think. When Mama's drunk, she cuss me and say I got your mahogany brown. Just thought you'd want to know what I look like now. Love, Tati. March 26th, 1995. P.S. Today's my birthday.
I hope you enjoyed that scene from The Seven Daughters of Dupree, narrated by Bonnie Turpin. The novel is available everywhere books are sold and in whatever format you prefer: hardcover, ebook, audiobook, and large print. So, if you can, please consider getting a copy of The Seven Daughters of Dupree today. Now, let's get to the episode.
I started studying literature and I was on my way to a PhD in English Lit when I decided I'd rather be trying to work on fiction than talking about it.
What's good? I'm Nikisha Elise Williams, and this is Black and Published on the Mahogany Books Podcast Network, bringing you the journeys of writers, poets, playwrights, and storytellers of all kinds. Today's guest is Rickey Fayne, author of the novel The Devil Three Times, a multi-generational story about one family, their spiritual gifts, and how they see their calling in life as either from God or Satan.
There's this way in which the devil, in sort of like the Black cultural consciousness, is already this divinity that was looking out for people like before it came to the US, right? And there's this sense that anything that's not in the church is also the devil, but like there was a way that people were sort of like reclaiming that as a source of power.
After Rickey's failed attempt at a PhD in English, he moonlighted as a high school English teacher, who finally gave him the push he needed to take himself and his work seriously. Plus, how his jealousy of literary greats like Ralph Ellison and Zora Neale Hurston almost kept him from pursuing his purpose. And in making the devil a central figure in his novel, what Rickey believes that says about the toll men face for being spiritually sensitive, and what's at stake for Black liberation with the devil at the helm of the fight. That and more is next when Black and Published continues.
How are you?
I'm well. I'm excited.
Awesome.
You turn that Bible every which way but loose, okay?
Thank you. I mean, that's what I was going for, exactly.
Mission accomplished, okay? I am so excited. So let's jump in. Rickey, when did you know that you were a writer?
Oh man, I knew I wanted to be a writer for a long time, but it felt like a pipe dream. Like, you know, how you have friends that want to be actors or singers, but they're not really doing anything about it. And so I don't know, it didn't feel like a thing that was possible. And so I started studying literature and I was on my way to a PhD in English lit when I decided I'd rather be trying to work on fiction than talking about it. So
Far into the PhD program were you when you were like, you know what? Maybe we should switch to the creative side.
you know, I was three chapters into my dissertation. So
Sir.
I know.
So then did you have to like take extra courses to switch the PhD to creative writing?
I kind of had to just leave that program behind. And then I taught high school for a couple of years while I was trying to get my writing off the ground. And then I applied for an MFA at another school.
That's a lot of school.
I know, but you know, I like my whole family is in school, so it
So
was like I don't think I've ever not been in school. Like there was
okay.
like a brief period where I was an intern at a small publisher, but other than that, I've like never been.
Okay, so career academics, got it. All
Yeah.
right, so then like what was it about being three chapters into your dissertation that you were like what was the call that said, you know what? I don't want to just talk about it. I want to do it.
For research, you have to read the same books over and over a lot. And so I was working on a chapter about Zora Neale Hurston and Ralph Ellison. And I remember like rereading their work and just feeling like, oh man, this is so gorgeous. Like I don't even have words to put to what, you know what I mean? Like I feel like you have to focus on a specific area of what it's doing, but I kind of wanted to think about all of it. And then I just sort of found myself feeling really jealous. Like I really wish I could be doing this sort of thing, you know? And so like at some point I just kind of like I was like, you know what? Maybe I should try. And then I took a creative writing class at like one of those community writing centers. It was Story Studio in Chicago. So I was secretly taking these classes there alongside pretending to do my dissertation research. And the first short story I started writing there is what kind of grew into the novel. And so I worked on it for like a couple of years, like trying to make it into. I was like, once I finish this short story, then I'll start moving on to other stuff. But I just kept going deeper into it. And then I started exploring some of the background characters. And eventually all of that grew into what became the novel.
So then what was the short story? Like which characters were the short story and what was the inspiration?
The short story, it's right in the middle of the book. The character Porter, For the Love of Money, like that chapter, that was the start of it. And it started out as this story about this unconventional friendship. But like one of the things that I realized one of the characters was trying to heal from was he had this relationship from his childhood that he never really got over. And so that was sort of like the core of it. And then sort of like the friendship aspect sort of took a back seat to him sort of being haunted by the specter of this past relationship.
Okay. I have so many questions about this book. I'm trying to be patient. So then in exploring the backstory to those initial characters that came to you from that workshop, when did you know that you had this like generational epic that was also going to shape the tenets of Christianity?
I feel like that came to me. So I started working on the other characters in the short story as sort of like a way to try to figure out what needed to happen. And so I told myself, I was like, okay, you need to like figure out Cassandra's point of view. And I kept trying to write stuff about her or from her perspective, but nothing really materialized for like months. And then finally, I was like, well, maybe someone needs to tell me about them. And that's when sort of James appeared. And it was kind of this voice that kind of reminded me a little bit of my dad that was telling me the story of their relationship. But then he had a bunch of other things to say about, well, you know, her dad and then his dad. And then like it kind of grew from there. He sort of like supplied everyone else and sort of fleshed everything out as I was just trying to get the story about this. I don't know. You know how you talk to like someone older and then they're trying to like tell you like you want a straight answer, but they're like the only way I can get you to that answer is to take you along this sort of winding course of everything that happened with their grandparents to sort of get there. And
That's
that's
the
what
way
that
I tell stories. So like it makes
yeah.
perfect sense to me. And like you talking about how you had to ask the characters, so what happened and find somebody to tell you the story. That's exactly how I wrote my book. So like I'm with you. I hope
Oh
no
wow.
one else is put off by this, but like I understand what your dilemma is and how you arrived here. So then in following the voices and the spirits of the characters and their fathers and grandfathers and on and so forth, when did you know that you had something?
I was afraid I had nothing for a really long time.
Mm.
And then when I was teaching high school, one of the other English teachers that was there is a poet. And I was telling him, I was like, oh, I'm trying to write a little bit. And he was like, you should share it. And I was like, no, it's not ready to share. And, I kind of brushed it off and then like he kept asking. And so finally I shared it with him and he was like, this is pretty good. You should try to do something with this. And I was like, okay. And I feel like that encouraged me to keep working on it. Once I got to James and he told me everything, then Cassandra's voice came to me out of nowhere. Once I found her voice, I feel like that's when things started to come together because it's funny, my wife actually she read the early version of the short story because I was asking her, can you help me like with the proofreading because she used to be an editor. And I could tell she didn't like it from, you know how you like someone's trying to be nice about it? I was like, I know it's not good, but I have to keep working. This is what I thought. I was just like, okay. And so I showed her the sections from Cassandra's point of view, and she was like, this is really good. I could tell she really meant what she was saying. And that's when I knew
Mm.
that I had something on my hands because the early parts weren't working for her, but something about what I was doing there was. And I was like, I just have to keep going here, and the rest will come together.
In listening to you speak about your journey, I feel like I hear a lot of hesitation leaving your PhD literature program and then going to teach high school and trying to write and being very reluctant to share before finally getting some external validation from your peers and your loved ones. And then that pushing you toward going into another program and getting the MFA, which is a whole lot. Did you feel like you were like floundering or were you kind of resolute and like, I know what I'm doing? I know the PhD isn't what I want. I want to be a writer. Or was that just like living in your delusion?
Well, you kind of have to delude yourself a little bit
A lot,
to get to that first,
a lot.
to get to that first draft, because it doesn't seem like I don't know. I feel like I didn't know anyone in my life. Like, so my parents, like my dad worked for the Board of Education and my mom taught elementary school. And I didn't know or I'd never met anyone who'd written fiction. It seemed like such a far away thing. It just seemed like something that like wasn't realistic. And I was kind of ashamed of like wanting to do it because it didn't feel like something that was real or that was possible, you know? And so I feel like part of my hesitation too was like, spending years reading like masterworks. I was literally like reading Toni Morrison and Zora Hurston and Ralph Ellison and Octavia Butler. And it's just like anything you start trying to write, like after reading that, is going to feel like this is like no good. But I feel like I had to like sort of keep trying to push past that to get to something that felt like it was better. But even then, I'm just like, well, it's still not Toni Morrison. so so I don't know. I felt like I was kind of ashamed to show it to people for a long time, and I still feel weird like seeing. I was like, oh, you're reading that?
The book is excellent. So then did you finish the first draft while you were in your MFA program or before you enrolled?
I did. So before the MFA program, I really only had like the chapter that turned out to be Porter's chapter, some stuff from James's perspective, and some stuff from Cassandra's perspective, which I used to apply. And then when I got in, I worked with Elizabeth McCracken. And so she said, you can workshop your novel, but I don't let anyone workshop anything under 100 pages for a novel because too little and you might kill it, or like people will start talking about it and it's not fleshed out, so you have to have 100 pages. And so I signed up for a date in the middle and I told myself, okay, I have to get to 100 pages by this day. So I started working on it and I was frustrated because I never really got to the end of any one chapter. It's just like I sort of like got distracted. Like I would start writing into one section and then this other character would draw my attention and I would start sort of like hearing from them. And so I ended up workshopping like a bunch of half chapters, like all together. And I didn't know how they were, but I feel like I needed to do that. I needed to hear from everyone first before I understood how anyone's one portion was going to end. And so that's when the other characters started coming to me and I started going further back in time. And I remember there was one section that ended up being what's set in the 19th century. And I remember starting to write that, and I was like, this is an unrelated thing. It has to be something that's like really far away. But I couldn't like stop thinking about it. And then I feel like I was like, well, I'll write a little bit and set it aside and it'll be something else. And then I realized, no, this is the same project and this is all linked in a way that I couldn't see at the time, but that made total sense once I got further into it.
And so where did the devil come in?
So the devil came in with Benny, actually.
Mm.
After Porter and Cassandra, Benny was the next person. And his voice came to me the same way Cassandra did. The first thing I heard from him was, because in all the other character story, he was just sort of like this no count person. And when I finally got to his voice, I felt like a lot of sympathy and interest in him. And so the first words that came to me was, the devil came to me 3 times in my life. That's what I heard from his perspective when I was trying to write his chapter. And so I kind of followed up on that. And then once he appeared there, I feel like that's when I started to see him in other people's stories too. And I understood that. So that's where he first appeared to me.
So then, in writing these different island chapters and figuring out the end, what was the feedback that you were getting that helped you toward this braided multi-generational narrative?
My workshop was kind of like, they loved what was happening, but they were at a loss for how it all fit together. And so their advice was, and Elizabeth's advice was, just keep going and then see what happens. So I feel like with her advice, I kind of just trusted myself to just keep going, and like whatever I got up and was speaking to me that morning, just do that and don't try to like force anything, just as long as I was still writing.
How long did it take?
So, counting from the beginning of the program, I got to a 200-page draft within a year. And that was the first draft. And then the second and third drafts took a little bit longer. So I'd say from beginning of 2019 to 2023. So like 3 or 4 years really working on it.
So 2019 to 2023 to get the third draft, what was your publishing process like? Like going to find the agent and get the deal and all the stuff?
You know, AWP, the writer conference? I submitted to writer to agent for AWP just 5 pages of one of the chapters, and it caught the attention of my now agent, Michelle Brower. So we had a meeting, and she's like, I really love these pages. Where are you? And I was kind of describing that, well, I have this character and that character. And she was like, okay, sounds good. Like, whenever you have a full draft, just email me. So this was in March of 2020. We were supposed to meet in person at AWP, but
The global pandemic.
yeah, the global pandemic hit, and so we met over Zoom. And we actually didn't meet in person until like a month before the book sold in 2023. That's when we had our first sort of like sit down in person meeting. But yeah, so she was really enthusiastic. And looking back at that draft I sent her, I was like, oh man, she was really taking a leap of faith. Because these pages.
Don't self-deprecate, because I don't know what was in those pages, but I know what's in this book, and this book is amazing.
Oh,
So
thank you.
you're very welcome.
Yeah, no. So I sent her the first draft, and she was like immediately, like, I really want to work with you on this. Let's go for it. And so she sent me some notes, and I sort of worked from those for a year. And then one of the turning points I had was because I'd had that chapter with Benny and the Devil for a long time, but I ended up taking this folklore class where we talked about Hans Christian Andersen and the Brothers Grimm, and just thinking about sort of like folklore as sort of like the backbone of literature. And that sort of got me thinking about like what I first loved in Zora Neale Hurston's writing. And so I went back to Mules and Men. And then like I remember seeing all these stories about the devil and like how that was working. And so it really inspired me to think about like how the devil in my book was working. And I remember there was this one really short story. It was kind of a joke where there was this man who was late from work and he was running and he hopped a fence post and sort of tore his work shirt. And he turned and said, oh, the devil. And he heard someone like crying and he turned around and it turned out to be the devil. And he said, what's wrong? He was like, everything y'all put on me is not my fault. He was like, some of that's on y'all. It ain't all on me. That's when I started thinking about, like, I guess the story of the Bible from the devil's perspective. Like, what would it look like if you really look into and strip away what you know about the story? This is a son who rebelled against his father and was kicked out and never allowed to return home. And then I started looking at other depictions of the devil. I looked a little bit at Paradise Lost and I looked a little bit at the Faust stories, and I started thinking about what would it look like for the family of people that I'm thinking about, like to have like the devil in their life. I think also too, what sort of interests me is thinking about how religion functions in people's lives, right? Because I feel like I grew up in and around the Black church, and you get the sense that like the Bible's not over, right? It's still being written. Like I feel like people talked about like Jesus and God as the devil is like you could encounter these people out in the world, right? And they're talked about as if they hold sway over people's individual lives. And I kind of, in writing that, wanted to be sort of like true to that understanding of the world, right? And to think about what that would mean to put a family that's not unlike my family at the center of the cosmological evolution of, or that's a weird way to say it. But
No, it's not. I think one it's the Bible is not over, but also the Bible is not the whole story, especially if you look
Yeah,
at the Abrahamic religions. Like
yeah,
there are other parts that aren't in the Bible that if you look to the other texts, like if you look at the Quran or you look at the Torah and you look at the Talmud, you're like, oh, these all work together. And so I can see how you could look at the Bible as a text of folklore and then want to play with it. When you got your deal, what did your editor say about all these different pieces of inspiration that you were bringing into this one novel?
my first editor, he really loved the book. He had grown up in a small town, in a small church community in the Midwest. And so he was really in for like the way that religion was working in there because he was like, I don't go to church anymore, but it's not like I really left those feelings all behind. Like they're a part of me in
Mm-hmm.
this really essential way, even though I don't agree with everything the church now stands for. Like something in that is central to how I understand myself. And I feel like that really spoke to him. And he also loved the different voices and how they were working and they're two sort of like in concert with one another.
Well, you said my first editor, which means there's a second. What's the story? What happened?
In the course of selling the book, sort of the whole company, Little Brown, sort of turned over. Right, so they got a new CEO, then a new publisher, and then in the course of that, some of the editors were let go, if you know the story behind
Yeah. Okay.
that.
I want to get to what I came here for. Can you read something from The Devil Three Times so that I can ask you all of my questions? The Devil Three Times by Rickey Fayne is an intergenerational epic about one family in Tennessee. Drawing on stories from the Bible as well as Black diasporic folklore, Rickey's protagonists wrestle with their spiritual gifts, whether they should answer the call of God or continue to cavort with the devil to get themselves, their family, and all their people free, while the devil himself tries to get back to heaven. Here's Rickey.
I can read the prologue, the first section.
That's perfect.
Okay. In the beginning was the Word, but before the Word spoke, there was the devil. And he was hell bent on sowing unrest and upheaval among the angels in heaven. You see, the devil loved nothing so much as stirring shit up, inciting Seraphim to fisticuffs. Jophiel and Michael all but threw hands when the devil doused the former's flaming sword and blamed the latter, and, worst of all, confounding that tall, not terribly bright Archangel Gabriel's mind with questions like, how does God expect us to reconcile free will with providence divine? When God heard that, he said, now, devil, I done put up with your foolishness long enough. And before the devil could plead his case, God stomped his right foot, parted the clouds, and like a storm from paradise, the devil rained down. The devil sat there on the cold, dark earth with his head hung low, powerful, lonesome. And when God said, let there be light, he hid in the shadows. From there he tempted Eve with his serpent, loosed Cain on Abel, and taught Noah how to drink and get naked. Now, Noah's folks like the devil, and the devil like Noah's folks. Anybody who can hold their liquor and keep their lives straight is never long in wanting friends. But he couldn't joke with Noah's folks like he could angels. They didn't banter, trade tall tales, kid, or have wolf tickets for sale. I mean, it was sad. Those poor folks couldn't cut the monkey if you held the knife for them. Case in point, one day the devil greeted Ham by asking him how he got to be so high on the hog, live so large, but Noah's son couldn't pick up what the devil put down. Just stood there as blank-faced and bewildered as the day he caught an eye full of his daddy's manhood. And so, though it pained his conscience, the devil had no choice but to trick Nimrod, Ham's grandson, into getting him home. You see, Nimrod claimed his might rivaled God's, ruled according to a merciless code. Nimrod's people couldn't do nothing without Nimrod's say so. All the devil had to do to trick Nimrod was testify to all the ways God flouted his laws. God's crimes were as numerous as they were inimical, being everywhere and nowhere all at once, working in ways mysterious, and bringing the world into being without Nimrod's input. Who gave God leave to make the earth and the heavens? Nimrod certainly hadn't sanctioned it. What was more, the devil said, pacing back and forth in front of the court, the great maker added insult to injury by failing to present himself to Nimrod, stand trial, and account for his many offenses. How could Nimrod abide such impertinence? Unless, and here the devil paused for dramatic effect, could it be Nimrod was not as powerful as he led folks to believe? Was the only power Nimrod had over the power the people conceded? All at once the people turned to Nimrod, considering, how bad was this man really? Already they were plotting. Already they were scheming. Nimrod could feel it. His iron grip was slipping. Nimrod's only hope was to string his bow to back his boast, fire arrows into heaven and hit something, anything celestial. I'm no expert of the science of it, the devil said, as a high arcing arrow clattered to the ground mere feet from him. But you might have a better shot at God if you aim from higher up. What if you built a tower? That just might be the best idea anyone's ever had, Nimrod said. seeing at once the project's potential to unite the populace and divert attention from his gross incompetence. The devil could hardly believe folks had let someone so self-interested lead them. No matter. Once he climbed the Tower of Babel and spread his wings, he would be home, free of these terrible people. Just as the devil was in spitting distance of the pearly gates, though, God wrinkled his nose, confounded all the bricklayers, reached out from the clouds, and flicked the tower down. The devil kicked around for a while, propping up empires and watching them fall, making waves wherever he found calm. But for long he heard tell of God sending down his only son, which hurt the devil's feelings because even though they butted heads now and then, the devil always thought of himself as God's own. But he didn't harp on God counting him out and was ready to forgive his father's every trespass if only he could get back home. And so the devil set out to find Jesus, God's favorite son, and caught up to him in the wilderness, hunting up four-leaf clovers, worrying the manes off dandelions, and watching the wind blow clouds about. The devil spent 40 days and 40 nights trying to reason with Jesus, brother to brother. Jesus, the devil said, I'm not evil. Not really. How could I be? Ain't nothing in me God ain't put there. Ain't a thing in my heart God didn't smile upon. All I want is to get back home. When Jesus heard the devil's words, he wept. Because you know Jesus real soft-hearted, especially when it comes to fathers not doing right by their sons. Jesus himself didn't hear from his real daddy until he was damn near 31. Jesus said, Devil, you really have touched me. My wings ain't strong enough to fly us both up to heaven, but if you can hold out just a little bit longer, I'll bend God's ear and see if we can't work out something. And so the devil bided his time for a few more eons, making bargains here, turning a soul or two away from God there, but his heart wasn't never really in it. When he just about lost all faith in Jesus, Jesus came to the devil in a dream. I've been working overtime on God, Jesus said, and still he ain't budged. I'll keep after it, but in the meantime, I need you to help me. You heard about what's happening in Africa? The devil said he hadn't. Jesus said they're robbing up black folks from there and working them to death in America. Huh, the devil said. Ain't that something? But he was only half listening. No human suffering could rival his own. All the devil took from Jesus' words was that Jesus had yet to find him a way home. Jesus hauled off and backhanded the poor devil. Plap. Listen to me, Jesus said. It is something, and you the somebody who needs to fix it. Ain't that God's problem? The devil asked, trying to rub some feeling back into his cheek, wondering what on earth had turned his sweet baby brother so evil mean. You think, Jesus huffed, but he's up in heaven twiddling his thumbs. Says all humans are one race, acting like he can't see color from his gold throne. The devil was struck dumb. He ain't never once in his life imagined Jesus would fix his mouth to talk wet about God. And if you was struck too, then the joke's on you. 'Cause if ain't but one thing in this world true, it's that Jesus loves him some black folks and black folks love them some Jesus. It's like they're the hand and he's the thumb, and he gets powerful angry when he sees them done wrong. Go south, Jesus told the devil. Free my people and watch out for them until I return. You do this for me, and I promise that one day I'll find a way to get you home. And when the devil woke, that's just what he did and is even now still trying to do. That's why black people have to go through hell to get free. And how come to this day the devil won't leave them be?
Now, Ricky, reading this book and being the church child that I am and the church woman that I am, I was like trying to go through the verses and aligning the stories. I'm like, okay, we got the curse of Ham. That's how we get to the how black people are cursing, how they justify slavery, doing all the like the mental gymnastics to make it make sense, right? To get to this one family. And then you have the folklore of the people could fly and all these different things. You even talk about Igbo's landing in St. Simon's Island with like a whole group of enslaved Africans turned back to the water instead of living in bondage. And yet you do this thing with the devil being almost the only way that Black people can get free, despite many Christian faith and belief in Jesus. Why?
Why?
Yes, why?
No, this is interesting. I was talking to someone I just met recently at a writers conference, and he was saying, like, after I read that part, because he's Black from Atlanta, and he was saying that, like, it made sense for him, like, growing up in the church and sort of like when you're young, you just sort of like believe unfailingly in everything that you're taught, but then you get out into the world and you see the way people treat and look at you, and you wonder, like, if God loves me, why is life this way for me and everyone I know and love and who looks like me? And I don't know, I feel like thinking about that sort of in the back of my mind was like, why is this a struggle? And how do I reconcile that sort of like belief in a higher power that I can't necessarily let go of, but can't buy fully into? And saying, well, if this story makes sense in a way. And also thinking too about how when you think about folklore, especially Zora Neale Hurston's folklore, a lot of the stories that we have their roots in West African religions. Right. So what was religion there, or sort of like a way of understanding the world, got smushed into these folk tales, right? But also too, I feel like if you think about like how, like especially Yoruba derived religions in like the Caribbean and Brazil, I feel like there was more latitude for like how the gods got remembered, right? Like you could sort of look at these Catholic saints and sort of make a case, or sort of like worship, and sort of like there was a way that it sort of fit and makes sense. Whereas in, the very Protestant US, there wasn't that much flexibility, right? There's only like two or three people you can align things with. And so a lot of those divinities like Shango and Isu Elegbar sort of got syncretized into the devil, right? And that's how we get stories like, like Robert Johnson meeting the devil at the crossroads. And sort of like there's this way in which the devil, in sort of like the Black cultural consciousness, is already this divinity that was looking out for people like before it came to the US, right? And there's this sense that anything that's not in the church is also the devil, but like there was a way that people were sort of like reclaiming that as a source of power, like Robert Johnson's story, because he kind of bought into that myth, like with the songs he was singing, right? Like, and talking about like the hellhound being on his trail and having like the mojo roots in his pocket, right? He sort of like bought into this way of being sort of like a mojo. And I feel like it was a way for people who didn't sort of necessarily fit in to sort of the politics of respectability of the Black community at the time to sort of like assert power and sort of like claim the spiritual knowledge that sort of like helped them through. So in a way in which it was always already sort of there, like the devil was already working in those ways.
So is Black liberation the devil's work?
That's the case, right? I mean, like if you think about like when did this country care about Black people becoming Christian, right? And you can draw a direct line from like the Haitian Revolution to sort of like the Second Great Awakening in the US. Because before they didn't care, people were doing their work, they can worship and do whatever. But then it became this sort of thing where like, oh, all that stuff y'all are doing, that's devil worship, right? You need to come to Christianity. And that's when sort of the stuff about servitude sort of started being emphasized, right? So it was a way to curtail slave rebellions, right? So in a lot of ways, yes, it was. Anything that was about Black liberation became sort of demonic in this way, right? Or sort of got associated with devil worship.
I asked that question because, like, you just mentioned the Haitian Revolution, and you mention it in the book a few times from the devil's point of view, that the devil went to Haiti and caused some ruckus and helped them get free. And I like cringed when I read that, only because that's still the standing myth about Haiti today, that in order to liberate and emancipate themselves, they made a deal with the devil in practicing voodoo, which is an actual religious practice that is syncretized from Ifa, which is practiced in Yoruba culture in Nigeria, but that they made this deal with the devil to get themselves free, and they've been demonized for it ever since because it was apparently so violent. But I'm like, you had these people working with machetes and you didn't think that they should use what was already in their hand to fight
Yeah,
back, right? And
yeah.
so, like, reading that, I was like, why would you say that? Like, it made me feel away just because of how Haiti has yet to recover from that stereotype and that caricature of not only them as people, but also of their religious practices, and then how people use that to justify continuing to oppress the island today.
And I feel like that's sort of what I'm trying to like think about deeply in this book, because I feel like when you're in the church, it's like you love everyone, but like the one figure you're allowed to like hate, like get thee behind me, like no one cares what you say about Satan or the devil, right? But I feel like that opens up this space in which when it's okay to hate this one entity, even if, is not out in the world and exists, it opens up this way to like anyone you sort of like align with this figure can be
Mm.
hated as well. Right. And so that's the thing. Like once you say that like someone's in league with the devil or doing devil, like there's an automatic way, like all sympathy and empathy sort of shuts off for this person. Right. I think in my mind, what I was trying to think about, like if there's sympathy for the devil in this book, then there's like enough room and sympathy for everyone. Right. Outside of that.
And then also, like, as you were just saying, that so much of Black culture is Black American culture, African culture, people in the diaspora has been aligned with evil and with Satan. And so when people start reciting verses about being washed clean as snow, being washed white as snow, Black people can never be washed white. And so in you saying that, it's like, if you could hate the devil and anything aligned with it, then it makes it easier for you to hate Black people, which
Yeah.
also then allows white supremacy to flourish.
Yeah.
Okay, I see where you are. So then, on that premise and showing that through this family, you start with Yetunde. So after the prologue that you read, we find Yetunde on a slave ship, chained to her deceased sister, and when she's let up for a break, she ends up currying favor with the white enslaver on the boat, and that's how she survives, and that's how her lineage survives. And Yetunde has the sight, and she can work with the herbs and do all the things, and then that's passed down through her generations, and the devil notices this. But what you did in this book that I haven't really seen a lot is that the gift of the sight and being able to see spirits and communicate with them and even practice in some of the medicinal ways is passed down through the men for the most part until we get to Cassandra. Why did you do that?
I thought it was interesting because I feel like there's this way in which this sort of like spiritual sensitivity and any kind of sensitivity is sort of like really policed out of men. So like a lot of them in the book don't really know what to do with it. Like they have this thing in them. And so it's like it's in everyone, but it manifests in a different way, or it's sort of like buried or sublimated, or they start drinking to get away from it, or they use it as an excuse to do other things, right? And so I feel like I kind of wanted to see what would it look like to sort of like show like each generation like coming to terms with it in a different way and seeing how it manifests. So I thought that was an interesting question because I do think we think about like when we think about these conjure stories, like you usually think of conjure women. It's rarer that you think of like conjure men, although there were definitely some cases of it. But I thought it would be interesting to think about what if someone has these gifts, but they don't know what to do with it and they just really just try to suppress it as best they can, right? Which ends up being the case. But I feel like with someone like Cassandra, it never occurred to her to suppress anything about herself. She's just like, this is who I am, this is what I see, this is what I want. It's kind of just like,
Oh, she's
I,
worrying the people.
yeah, and you know, and people are really uncomfortable with it. But she didn't care, right? Whereas someone like John, like her son, right? He has these things and he is trying desperately to keep it under wraps. Like, no, no, please. Like, all he wants is to sort of do right by God. But he keeps seeing these things that he can't quite reconcile. Right. And that's sort of his struggle. Whereas his mom sort of like had these same gifts and she sort of like radically embraced them. He sort of felt like he had to like keep it all like really tightly bound.
But you do that throughout the book. It's like Walter ran, he was the preacher. He founded the church. He was like, yes, I can see. Yes, I can hear. I've seen the devil and I want nothing to do with you. Let me run to Jesus. Right?
Yeah.
Everybody remembers Reverend Walter from the A&E church. And then as you keep going down the line, like I think Robert and Benny have the discussion about, yeah, I see them, I hear them too. And Benny was a singer. And then that reminded me of the scene in Sinners, but then also the Robert Johnson story that you told about how their gifts manifest and then how alcoholism becomes the way for many of the men to cope. Alcoholism and adultery, like
Yeah.
they were horrible. Like they were horrible. Why make them like so, I don't want to say stereotypical, but like reading the novel, I'm just like, these men ain't shit. Like you cheating on your wife, you don't have a real reason why, you stealing your adopted brother's girl, you're drinking yourself to death, you're beating on them. They're just all kinds of horrible. Why, sir?
Part of it was I wanted to think about, so when we think about generational trauma, right? You can't solve it in the span of one generation. Like you can't solve everything yourself. But I feel like the hope is that like you see and do a little bit better than your parents did before you, right? And that keeps going, right? So, and I feel like coming out of slavery, that was traumatic. It was traumatic in ways that it feels like no one in that generation really knew how to deal with, right? And I feel like the way that most of them did was sort of like to gloss over it and to sort of like, not necessarily, I don't know if they were ashamed of it, but I feel like if we look at like all the things that weren't said to their children, or there was some sort of sense of we want to bury that and move past it and try to get forward, right? But I feel like what we learned is you can't just do that. It comes out in other ways, right? And I think that once you get to a point where you realize this was the way I was taught, but maybe in this next generation, I don't have to do that to the same degree to get a little bit better. And so part of what I wanted to do in portraying that was saying like, okay, these people are dealing with some traumatic issues that they're not working through. But maybe like when they look around or they get to a point where they understand a little bit more, they try not to pass that along.
But
And so
their
by the
point is
get to the
always
end,
on their deathbed. Like they're always dying when they have this revelation about like, well, damn, I wasn't like the best person.
yeah.
And I wish I could have done better. And these are the things that I've learned. Come here, let me tell you a story right fast before I die.
I mean, sometimes it's like that. But I mean, I think too, I feel like the turning point is sort of like when James comes into the picture. And he's not perfect, but I feel like he really wants to do things differently from how they were done. And I feel like then that becomes sort of like something that helps John cope with the way he sees and understands the world. So that by the end, we kind of get like, not saying that like they're perfect, but I feel like they're better than how their uncles and grandfathers were, right?
Yeah. Yes. They do get better.
Yeah.
They don't get saved, but they get better.
But I mean, honestly, when I think about it, because one of the things someone asked me at one point, like, does the devil ever get back into heaven? And it's like, one of the
Great
things,
question. I wish I had asked it.
well, like, it's like, I feel like, are we over racism? Like, are things better or equal in this country? No. And so I feel like I kind of want to be hopeful, but I'm also super, I don't know, not necessarily skeptical, but I want to think about things as they are because I feel like we need a solid understanding of how things are before we can work to get them better. And so that's to say that, all those problems, they're not solved and they can't be solved within the space of like, at least as far as I've come. So I looked at it and I was just like, well, things are a little bit better for them, but it's not over.
So the devil doesn't get to heaven until Black people get free. Oh Lord, that's a tall order, sir.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's the deal.
So, with all that said, with all that you explore, with all the different myths that you include, what do you want people to take away from this novel that started as a way for you to break out of a life that you did not want?
I think one of the biggest things is that I feel like stories guide so much of how we understand ourselves and our place in the world. And I feel like when we don't question them or interrogate them or think about them from different angles, we can sort of be trapped in these cycles that are unproductive for us. And so
Mm.
just because something is like the Bible or like these folklore is sort of like taken as given, I want us to sort of like reimagine them to better fit ourselves. Right? I think that's the biggest thing.
So before I let you go for the morning, I want to do a speed run in a game. What is your favorite book?
Song of Solomon.
Who is your favorite author?
Toni Morrison is like up there, permanent fixture for all of us, I think. It's just sort of like as GOAT, but I feel like my favorite living author, Edward P. Jones, is like another big one for me.
Who is your favorite artist, any medium?
He's everybody's favorite artist right now, Kendrick Lamar.
Who as an author do you most admire?
I love Octavia Butler. I think Colson Whitehead is a big one. I remember reading The Intuitionist and just being blown away by that first book, and then, everyone caught on with the Underground Railroad. I think too, Percival Everett, I was talking to my wife about this. I was like, Percival's been doing what he's been doing for like
Forever.
ever, and he hasn't really changed up the formula. It's just everyone else is kind of like caught on at the last minute.
If money were no object, where would you go? What would you do? And where would you live?
I'd probably move back to Chicago and I would keep writing because I don't know, I feel like it's the only thing I'm really fit to or care about doing in a row. So I don't think any amount of money would change that. I think that's true for most writers. You cross your fingers that it'll pay some bills, but you're not doing it for any other reason than you just feel called to do it.
Name 3 things on your bucket list.
I want to visit the plantation where my ancestors were enslaved, and I know exactly where it is, and I keep looking at it on the map, and I'm like, I'm gonna go there. I haven't been to Africa yet. That's on my bucket list. I feel like do like a tour of West African countries would be like up there, and then also to I don't know. I don't think I have a third thing. I
Okay.
know.
What brings you joy?
My son, playing with him and like listening to and talking to him and seeing how his mind works. Like he was trying to convince me to why we need a jetpack on the end of the car to sort of like, fly up over traffic. Like, and you keep trying to say, you can't do that, but his mind just keeps trying to go around, like, It's possible.
You have to make him watch the Jetsons now.
Yeah. He would flip out. No. What else brings me joy? I feel like reading brings me joy. I feel like there's this kind of way that like when you're really engaged with a book and you know that the writer cares about what they're doing and is really trying to like get you to see or understand something or work out something for themselves. I feel like it's just magic.
And what brings you peace?
I'm gonna be real boring and say the same thing. I don't know. I sit in this room and I read books.
Since people can't see, I'll just describe this room. It has like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 bookshelves. They're stacked with books of all sizes, and I hope it's really peaceful in there. So our game is called Rewriting the Classics. Classic is however you define it.
Okay.
Name a book you wish you would have written.
The Great Gatsby. There are these like random appearances of Black people that are like pivotal to the plot in like a lot of different ways that I feel like if I was to like rework that, I would think about like those people. Because even like when the woman gets run over at the end, like who steps forward, but they never get a name. They're just like really well dressed Black folk that come in with the information. And so like, I saw that car. Like literally comes out of nowhere. I think he calls him like a modish Negro. He's like, I saw that car hit this woman. And then he just like fades into the background again.
This side character, we're going to
Yeah.
make the entire world around. Name a book where you want to change the ending, and how would you do it?
Americana. I remember I got to the end of that and I was like, why are these people getting together? Like they should be apart. What else? I remember being upset by the ending of Native Son just because it felt like, okay, now we have a live text sociology paper that's being like written. Which is nothing Baldwin didn't already say.
And then my messy question, name a book that you think is overrated or overtaught and why.
Oh, this part's airing, right?
Yes, it's airing. You can do dead people. You can do dead white people that you taught in high school. Stop looking around the show.
I'm looking around the shelves. I'm thinking of Ernest Hemingway stuff. I feel like For Whom the Bell Tolls. Like, why are we reading that? And honestly, really just, I feel like for Hemingway, all we need is The Sun Also Rises in our time, which I don't think people pick up that much anymore. And The Old Man and the Sea. Everything else, just like throw it to the trash heap.
All right. And so then my final question for you today, when you are dead and gone and among the ancestors, what would you like someone to write about the legacy of words and work that you left behind?
I just want to hear that it moved them or inspired them or made them think about something they hadn't in a different way. I don't know. I feel like, so there's this quote from Walter Benjamin in like Theses of the Philosophy of History, where he says that like, in a redeemed humanity, all stories will be citable, right? Meaning that like once we get to the end and we look back, like we'll know that we've arrived at redemption when we can look really closely at each moment and not feel shame. And I feel like I want my books to sort of like move us toward that goal.
Big thank you to Rickey Fayne for being here today on Black and Published. You can follow Rickey on his website, www.rickeyfayne.com. And make sure you check out The Devil 3 Times. It's out now from Little Brown. You can get a copy of the novel from Mahogany Books and get 10% off your first purchase using code BLACKPUB at checkout. That's BLKPUB. That's our show for the week. If you like this episode and want more Black and Published, head to our Instagram page. It's at Black and Published, and that's BLK and Published. There, I've posted a bonus clip from my interview with Rickey about the decision he made in his own life to not pass generational trauma and generational pain. Make sure you check it out and let me know what you think in the comments. I'll holler at y'all next week when our guests will be Gwendolyn Wallace and Tanya Ingle, the author and illustrator of Dancing with Water.
The character actually came first. It was really important to me, especially as a queer Black woman, to have a non-binary children's book main character. And I knew that this felt even more urgent after my little sibling came out to my parents as non-binary. And I realized that looking around, there just aren't many children's books with non-binary main characters who use they, them pronouns, and the ones that are often specifically about gender rather than a kid living their life.
That's next week on Black and Published. I'll talk to you then. Peace.
What's going on, family? This is Derek Young
and Ramonda Young,
owners of both Mahogany Books and the Mahogany Books Podcast Network.
We really want to thank each and every one of you for listening to this episode. And if you enjoyed what you just heard, drop us a review and rate us on whatever platform you download podcasts on.
We truly appreciate each and every one of you for supporting us and making us your go-to for Black books. And we look forward to connecting with you all sometime in the future.
Thank you again, fam. And always remember, Black books matter.